Alright, time for another DraftScience video presentation. So we will just start with the science, and then we will go into the context of how people are arguing and whether there should be any expectation of a civil, rational conversation because the people on the other side are incapable of making reasoned or fair critiques of anything ever. Okay? And I have no obligation to be infinitely patient in my response to trolls. And that's all they are, is trolls. In defense of a religion, frankly. So here's Pyrrho's statement, one of them. One of the arrogant, obnoxious statements he makes as if he has one shred of evidence to prove it, which he doesn't have, which never has been presented. So again, anyone who wishes to say I'm wrong, I guess I have to say you can only comment about me being wrong if you provide some link to some physicist, some authority, verifying what you're saying with something called evidence, an experiment that has evidence in it. Yeah, that should be what science is. Science should be as you point to the big pile of evidence, just like I said, it's like a trial. You're showing up at the trial and all you're doing is insulting the way the defendant looks and insulting the lawyers and insulting the judge, and you have some expectation that yes, maybe that works on the jury, the morons in an audience somewhere, but it really shouldn't work for people who give a shit about the truth. People who want the truth really aren't interested in all your little raggy statements. They're interested in your evidence. So present that. Show it on the table. Point to it, pick up the piece of evidence and show it to the camera. So anyway,
what current science says is...
Okay, he says what current science says. Well, current science says to bowlers, you're better off with a lighter bowling ball. Now, do you believe that's good advice that current science is saying that to bowlers? It's telling them overtly, and bowlers are believing it, and they're trying to throw lighter balls. That's the funny part here. That science is absolute rubbish. You don't have a single shred of real-world evidence demonstrating that there is, in fact, more joules of energy in an 8-pound bowling ball thrown with the same force as a 16-pound bowling ball. You have zero evidence that this is, in fact, a truth, and yet you're saying it proudly. Science says. Even though there's zero evidence in support of what it's saying. Zero evidence. Not a little bit of evidence. Really zero credible evidence. And you won't link to any evidence. You won't show me any evidence. And all your trolly people will do for you is lie for your evidence. I mean, they'll make troll videos, okay, where they distort the truth. But they won't even come close to doing anything like a scientific experiment. To prove it. To show somebody who says, I don't really believe that.
That the bigger the mass, for a set amount of energy, the bigger the mass, the more the momentum. The same amount of it.
Okay, same amount of energy, different momentum. Same energy, different momentum. That's impossible, can never happen. Everything that is transferred from one thing to another, I throw the scissors into the other hand, all of its momentum bangs into me and moves pieces of me, and effectively it always reduces to heat, usually. I mean, you can usually trace any interactions and eventually the energy is lost to the environment in the form of heat. But heat isn't anything special. Heat is just little atoms moving. So instead of the big pin moving, you're moving the little pins inside of something. But it always has to be reduced to that. And Pyrrho even brought up entropy. And entropy just means it's harder. It's really easy to take, the big piece of momentum and convert it into the little pieces moving. And it's a lot harder to convert the little pieces moving into a big piece moving, because that means you have to direct the energy. See, everything wants to radiate like the Earth is radiating right now, or the sun's radiating. The sun's radiating its energy in all directions. For it to break entropy, it needs to radiate only in one direction. But it can do it. There are systems that allow that to happen. If I put a big razor blade in space, right where the Earth is orbiting, And every time the Earth goes around, it cuts off a piece and gives it a little push. So we lose that piece of the Earth every time the Earth goes around. We sliver off a little piece of the Earth, right? And we push it just out into a little further orbit so it escapes the sun. The fact is that all those pieces will go to the same place, and all those pieces will now be a breaking of entropy. A breaking of the fact that it all goes into little pieces of energy. Well, we'll start shaving off big pieces of energy and sending them all in one direction. That breaks entropy. It's not a very complex system, but it has to have some complexity for it to be able to break entropy. That's the real science, as opposed to this fake crap that these spewers of propaganda, unevidenced religious dogma. That's all this is. It's all it ever was. It's junk physics. All right, so back to this experiment. So this proves Pyrrho's argument wrong. And it's right in front of you. It's, forget about what Professor Lewin says or anything, but, we'll pay some attention. But just watch the experiment, and it kind of tells you the truth.
Now we're going to do an experiment whereby I'm going to make M2 twice the mass. M2 is 488 plus or minus 1 gram.
I thought you did both.
That's going to be interesting, because now you really begin to test the conservation of momentum. The momentum before is 0. I burn the wire, momentum afterwards is also 0.
All right, so we did 2 experiments. I thought this had both in it, but it doesn't. Okay, so the first experiment just has 2 carts of the same mass. So he just said, I'm going to double the mass. So you just have 2 carts with the same mass. And they both leave. You have a spring between them. You put a piece of wire holding them at the same compression. Now, it's not exactly the same. So the first time he did it, the numbers will be 2 and 2. Okay, 2 seconds. So it's 2 milliseconds. Okay, 200 milliseconds is the time they go away out, which means they had exactly the same velocity. And then you're going to put a heavier cart, so you have twice as much cart. You have twice as much cart on one side, twice as much mass, and you do the same experiment, okay? And the one leaves at exactly the same, okay? Around 200, right? The string's a little different each time you do it, so it's a little bit more, a little bit less, but the idea is this cart leaves with exactly the same energy from the spring, and this cart leaves with half of the velocity, but it has twice as much mass, so it has exactly the same amount of joules of energy too. So you're basically just saying there is a conservation of momentum. That's what he's saying. The spring always produces the same joules in both directions. It doesn't matter whether I have a brick wall here or I have a feather here. Okay, this is going to do the same thing each time. And this is going to do the same thing each time. Now the feather is going a little too far just because you have to have an object heavier than the spring's velocity. The spring only has a maximum velocity. If I just push the spring against a brick wall, it only jumps off the brick wall at a certain maximum speed. Now if I put something on it so light that it's lighter than the speed of the spring, that is, it takes off fast, so fast that it's already going as fast as the spring, it can't go any faster because it's already left the spring. You get it? So it can't absorb all of the energy. You can't make something leave the spring faster than the spring can move. So it's always just about how fast the spring moves. Now in Pyrrho's video, I think that's what his chart was. His chart was just a chart about the compression of the spring. It wasn't about the launching speed. It was about how the spring actually decompresses as it's pushing different objects. Obviously, when it's pushing a heavy object, the spring can't move as fast. And when it's pushing a light object, it moves much faster. So that's what the velocity difference is. All right, so this isn't in contention anywhere. The spring initially moves a little bit slow, and then it goes faster and faster as it expands. I mean, that's not news to anyone. All right, so let's continue.
But the velocities, I erased this. V2 prime divided by V1 prime equals M1 divided by M2. And so twice the mass will get half the speed. And so now you're going to see that one car will go twice as slow as the other. That's the only way that nature can conserve momentum. Nature has no choice. Nature can deal with kinetic energy one way or another.
Okay, so when he says nature can deal with kinetic energy one way or the other, he's saying it's completely fudge. We're just making this shit up. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. It's not rigid. It doesn't have anything to do with reality. It's a completely fake energy because you can just fudge it. You can just pretend, oh, it lost half its energy to some vague notion of heat or something we didn't measure. You can just make up crap. But that's what you have to do. You have to make up something. Momentum, Newton's physics, always works.
But it cannot finagle momentum. So it must give the more massive car half the speed than it gives the other car. And so
it's half the speed because it has to give it the 100 joules. If it's 100 joules of energy going both ways, that's all it can ever do. It can just keep giving 100 joules that way and 100 joules that way, and that's all it can do. There isn't anything else it can do, and it's the same case for every single circumstance, whether it's inside a gun or you're pulling a bow. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It's always an explosion in both directions. There's always the recoil. There's always the equal and opposite reaction, and the equal and opposite reaction is just made out of the fact that energy is can always be converted into some event that essentially is going to be an explosion.
we're going to redo this experiment now with a...
Alright, so you see the initial numbers were 219 and 223. So you can see that they're both the same, right? They're 5/100ths of a millisecond difference. So, and the next numbers will be different in the sense there might be 197, okay, and the other one will be 402. So just understand that's just because he's using a system that isn't perfect in terms of the compression of the spring. So because he's using a wire to compress the spring, obviously the wire has to be exactly the same size each time perfectly to compress the spring, and so the spring isn't compressed exactly the same each time. But you can see that the equal carts go away at equal momentums and equal velocities because they have an equal mass.
car here, which is twice the mass, and this one equals...
Sorry, I forgot how tedious this was. It's a bit tedious.
Where's my other car? Oh, my car is here. And this one is one's mass. So this is the 244.
So he's using a bow as a spring. So it's not technically a coiled spring, but it's the same idea. It's a bow, a piece of metal that's being bent. Okay, and it produces a certain amount of reflexive bending.
And the one on your right is the 488. So I have to bring them together again with a string. So I do the work now. I always do the work here in 26100. I do the work. I squeeze these springs. I get paid for that, by the way. And that's potential energy that goes into the spring. Right?
So again, more just kind of rubbish talk about this potential energy thing. It's real energy that goes into the spring, and whether, the whole idea of potential, it's not potential as far as the carts are concerned at the time. They don't give a shit. They don't know they're in some circumstance where they're going to have to go somewhere pretty soon. So they don't have any potential. Okay, they only can have what you give them. They can only move when they're moved. The Earth has a potential to blow up right underneath me, right? It has a potential that it could just blow up someday and shoot me into space. You don't sit there and argue that I have potential energy. I don't have anything. Okay, the Earth has it.
It is. Momentum is zero. Kinetic energy is zero.
Well, obviously the energy in the spring is not zero. So that would be the important one.
I have to zero the timers. Oh, and I would like to make a prediction. I would like to see, we'll measure T1, and then we'll measure T2, and then we get a number, and we get a number, and And if we multiply this number by 2.00, then I would like to get this number. Within the uncertainty.
So again, he's just within the uncertainty principle. Isn't that cute? Oh no, it's the uncertainty of the measurement. Yes, the flaws in the experiment, any friction and whatnot, any bouncing or jitter or whatever can be caused. Obviously, him using a torch to burn the spring, in my opinion, isn't too brilliant. Just creating heat, changing the spring a little bit. But anyway, what I want to say. So he's predicting, okay, same energy, all right, and obviously the velocities will be different by the same factor that the mass is different. So if you make it half the mass or twice as much mass, then you do the same thing to the velocity. You just invert it. It's either half as much or twice as much. Exactly proportional, and it always works. So this physics always works. It's always accurate. It's always true. It always, always, always tells you what's happening in a situation, and you absolutely need no other physics. You need no other complement. You need no modern new formula to fix it, because it's not in any way broken. His prediction will be completely realized as an outcome, and he doesn't need some new formula to tell him, no, there was secret magical energy.
Is of the measurements. There is always an uncertainty in any measurement that you do. All right? Make sure that, are they timer 0? Okay, there we go.
So again, this is just sort of show. I'm going to burn the string, instead of just sitting there and cutting it, right? And so obviously the torch is now heating, not only the carts, but the spring, which isn't a brilliant idea when you're trying to do a nice controlled experiment. All right, so you see the numbers. So yes, instead of 19, you have 193 is the sort of the standard, and you can see the 406 is just about twice as much as the 193. So pretty much within the margins of hundreds of seconds of potential error, hundreds of milliseconds, a millisecond of error. Exactly what he predicted, and exactly what you would expect, and exactly what Newton would expect, and exactly how the real world actually functions. And absolutely no need now to say that heavy cart has 1/2 the energy. So the new modern formula, right? The old formula says they both have the same joules of energy. Momentum says they're still got the same energy. If I put a little generator on them, I will generate the same electricity based on both of their motions. Okay, no doubt about it. That's a fact. It works. The modern formula says no, that little cart has twice as much energy as that heavy cart. And there's no reasoning for it. There's no experiment showing it. You'll never, ever, ever, ever do an experiment where you'll collect it. If we bounce both of those objects into the same spring, that is, we collect their energy with the same spring, they will compress the spring exactly the same. Now, that would have been helpful if Professor Lewin did that in the experiment just to prove it all, prove it's exactly the same energy, right? But he can't do that because then he's violating the duality principle. Somehow the modern theory needs to exist somehow. Somehow we have to have a duality with a preposterous theory, a preposterously useless formula that always gets the wrong answer. Yes, somehow we need that, because that makes our nuclear physics more fun, because now we can make we can make electrons into superpower particles, because we can give them preposterous amounts of energy by just making them lighter and faster. So if we do crash them into the same spring, they will compress the spring exactly the same amount. And it's just a fact, and it's just until somebody provides me evidence that that doesn't happen, that the twice as heavy thing going half as fast doesn't have exactly the same capacity to push. It weighs exactly the same. If we bang both of them into a scale, when they hit the scale, they'll read a number, that number, the maximum weight. They will both read the same maximum weight. They will compress just as much. They will hit with just as many foot-pounds of pressure, because that's all a joule really is a weight. A joule is a stick of butter falling a meter and hitting. That's a joule. It's a weight hitting the ground. So Pyrrho says this is not what science says. He says he has the real physics somewhere, and that this guy saying momentum is always conserved is a liar and an idiot. He's a fool. He doesn't know modern physics, because Pyrrho has new modern physics that says somehow this isn't true. Momentum isn't always conserved, and it isn't always completely accurate in terms of defining something's actual energy. When of course it is, and there's absolutely no credible evidence defending any alternative theory. No credible evidence. Zero. No one will show me a link to the credible experimental evidence disproving this fact, that momentum is always conserved. You can never get away from it. You can never have the recoil of the gun not be equal to the momentum of the bullet. You can never break that law. You can never have, you can never get away from the fact that it always is this equal opposite reaction crap. You always have to eject something. You can't just let something go. You have to eject it. And when you eject something, you're going to experience the equal and opposite reaction to that ejection. All right. So, well, we see what else he has to say, right? Just to be fair. We'll speed that up. What is it? You ought to put a mirror in one of the seats.
On the button.
Yeah.
406 and 193. 0.406. Is that what you see?
It's a little bit too much of a cartoon character.
I don't even need my calculator to multiply this by 2. I can even do that by heart. 9, 3, 0.396, 0.406.
You got the wrong answers. It's kind of funny. Whoops. Yeah. So he can do it by heart, and he failed to do it by heart. So that's kind of funny. He's multiplying by 2. Okay, it wasn't that challenging. So he has to write all of this crap and pause the video for all of this. Oh, I don't have it. Yeah, it's just running forever.
Close enough. The two are in excellent agreement within the 2.5% uncertainty in each measurement. So, you see?
So he talked over himself, again, edited himself.
That's exactly how you can demonstrate the conservation of momentum. They picked up kinetic energy, but after the wire was burned.
Okay, they pick up kinetic energy, whatever that means. You won't be able to show it anywhere. You won't show any experiment where, hey, I found it, I showed it to you. I mean, I'll draw the simple gravity experiment again. I mean, it's impossible for somebody reasonable to sit there and argue with these facts. It's just impossible to do it rationally. You have to be an irrational, lying, scummy propagandist to sit there and try to turn this into, oh yeah, that's just showing it. No, it's not showing it. If he, like I said, if he just said, well, it has the extra kinetic energy. But if he actually just said, well, let's try to collect it. Let's put a spring at the other end and see how hard they hit the spring and see if they have a different amount of energy. Because if he did that, he'd find that, oh yeah, just like bowling balls, the 16-pound ball and the 8-pound ball, now you throw them with the same energy, that's all the energy they can have. They can just have the energy you throw them with, and that's all they can have, and they can't lose it. They can't, they can't instantly lose it. I mean, as soon as the 16-pound ball leaves your hand, it doesn't somehow have half the energy. It doesn't happen. It's an insanely silly theory that somehow the heavier cart just magically lost half of its energy, its momentum, its substance. The joules of energy somehow just disappeared, and now it has 50% less energy than the little cart. How can that make any sense? It can't make any sense, and it can't be demonstrated in a single experiment. So why do we have this formula duality? So I guess I'll just do that since I wrote it on the board. Not that it was much of an effort, but understand. Okay, This formula is Newton's formula, okay? It was true for Newton. Newton did a kind of miraculous thing, okay? He, for the first time, could tell people exactly what everything, moving in the universe that they knew about, the moons of Saturn and this and that, Halley's Comet. He could tell you where they're going to be at any moment because he knew exactly how much momentum they had, how much velocity they had and mass they had, and he could predict exactly where they're going to go. And by seeing where they went, he could predict this mass and velocity argument. He could tell you how much they weighed by just watching where they ended up, or going through those statistics. And it works. And there was no failure here. This worked. Okay, this works all the time. There's no evidence that this fails to be good math. Fails to be a good way of understanding what energy is in the universe. That energy is, in fact, okay, if you want to know what a force is, mv. That's the force. Just find out how much mass, how many little bits of mass are moving with what velocity, and you know how much force the thing has. Okay, you want to know its energy? Same thing. Okay, and momentum, same thing. They're all the same thing. Okay, mass times velocity always equals the energy, always equals the force. No, and there's no problem. It never not works, right? And it didn't not work at Newton's time. It works. And the only thing they got confused in is something so obvious that you'd say, how could they be fooled by something so obvious? I throw two things, a light thing and a heavy thing, into gravity. The heavy thing doesn't get very far because the gravity hits the heavy mass much more. And the light thing shoots through the gravity and goes much higher. But it doesn't mean anything, because when the light thing falls, it's going to fall with exactly the same velocity, and so they're both going to fall at the same rate. And the fact is, the heavy thing is going to collect a lot more energy in that falling process, but it's going to collect a lot more gravity. It has more atoms moving. Having more atoms moving means you'll hit with more impact. So it'll end up being equal. The light thing falling far is going to be the same thing as the heavy thing falling less. I mean, no, that's going to happen. There's nobody has anybody sensible knows that. Yeah, you throw a feather in the you throw a piece of styrofoam in the air, and it goes higher than a piece of lead, a lot higher. And but when they fall, the lead's going to win. So let's just try to find some things that have equal values in terms of the inverse mass thing. So something with half the mass is the best way to do the experiment, because then you'll get twice the velocity and you get 4 times the height. And that looks really cool, but it doesn't mean anything, because when they land, they're going to land with exactly the same force that lifted them. Well, I was going to draw that again, but maybe I still will. So anyway, this didn't fail in any way. There's no historical evidence that this needed to be fixed. And the only reason why this was created is because Leibniz hated Newton. Okay, because Newton caught him stealing his calculus. And so Leibniz came up with this piece of garbage as a theory, because he didn't like Newton's theory was too austere. It wasn't fun enough. It was too cold and too ungodly. That's the truth of it. This was too atheist, okay? This fact was too atheist for Leibniz. And that's why he invented this living force. All right, so understand that's what it was called, living force. Okay? And this is supposed to be somehow, so there's absolutely no reason to invent it. No reason this failed. And this doesn't explain anything but 1% of the experiments you could do. You can do experiments that cheat. So you can drop things into clay, or you can do some other kind of experiment to sort of cheat the argument. Okay? And that's the only ones that were on this side. And yet, it basically did fail. So the truth is, Leibniz died, nobody. Okay? Nobody was at his funeral. Okay? So it wasn't like this was a big win. And then 20 years after his death, this chick in France decides to dig up this bad theory and promote it. And then she got another scientist guy in Denmark, or wherever the hell he was, who did the clay experiments. And, clay has a prejudice. Fast things go deeper into the clay than slow things. Clay is stickier for slow things. So if you're going slow, you interact more with the pieces of clay and you don't get as far. But if you go fast, you can sneak through the clay and you can go a lot further. You get less friction. So that's just the truth. But that's it. So that's the only crap that in any way supports it. And again, a scientist can understand that. A scientist can understand some ways to collect energy will sort of lie to you because they do have a bias for velocity or a bias for mass. You know, you probably can find some experiments to do the opposite. But the point is, it's barely survivable. And this was the form it was in. So let's understand, for 200 years, this formula was in this form. So you know it was already half wrong. It was already 100% giving you wrong answers. It was saying there was 200 joules when we would, the double modern theory has it only at 100 joules. So it was 100% off in the answers that would tell you the predictions. The predictions were that far off, and they didn't notice for 200 years. That's how bad this physics was. That's how little scrutiny there was. That's how little capacity they had to test for real answers. And then in the 1800s, okay, around 1800, they put this little half in front of it. Okay, so at least they fixed the fact that it was 100% off. Okay, but it's still 100% off because it's still this preposterous notion that somehow velocity is much more important than mass when it comes to energy. And there's absolutely no experimental evidence defending it. None. And I'm somehow a bad person because I say, well, this is kind of smells of really bad physics. This looks like really bad science. You have no experimental evidence. I mean, no credible experimental evidence ever defending that this ever exists. And every bit of evidence, when you really do the experiment that's anything like a good experiment, demonstrates that this is not true, that the only thing there is the MV. That's the real thing, that's energy. There is no squaring of velocity, there's no halving of mass. They're equal partners in defining what something's energy is. It's just important how fast the electron is going, it's just important as how heavy is it. And those are the facts. That's what all the evidence points to. This is the truth. All right. And physics can't admit they made a huge stupid choice 200 years ago to jump on this silly bandwagon. And it was just that, a silly bandwagon, completely uncredible science. It's a holy ghost in the middle of their religion, and it looks stupid, it makes the science stupid, it destroys their credibility, and it has people doing dishonest things like Pyrrho, insulting people who demand evidence, insulting people who say you have zero evidence to defend this preposterous pile of crap, this 1/2 mv squared crap. But that's the truth of it. You know, and again, are you fair, reasonable people, or are you just bigots? You know, are you just propagandists for religion? Because that's all its origin is religion. It was invented for metaphysical purposes, not physical purposes. It was social purposes, okay, not factual evidence purposes. It's just the worst kind of science you can call science. It's not science. It's anti-science. It's certainly all of the negative things they have thrown at me as insults. This smells of every kind of bit of chicanery, deception, lies, distortion. It has nothing good on its side. There's not one good player in defense of this horrible formula that is absolute nonsense that never had any function except to break good physics. They broke good, solid physics for no good reason, just to satisfy a religious kook's ambitions. Period. And here they are arguing in defense of that. Here they are doing this extraordinary lying and perversion of the truth to defend something that is tainted. I mean, it's almost enough of a video right there. All right, well, we'll show this Stephen Bro thing just to throw in that little more piece, another little piece of evidence. Let me find that video. All right, should be back. Okay, so this was, Stephen Bro just did this trolly, horrible video. So the experiment he did that has actual credibility as a scientific experiment, I mean, it's done better, not very well, but better than the other ones for sure. There's actually a ruler, there's some capacity to get a fair understanding of what the experiment is. And he shows two different masses being shot with the same force and then collected with another spring. I mean, in my opinion, a pretty realistically sensible way to see if this kinetic energy stuff actually exists. The theory is, their formula says this white object that's twice as heavy is somehow got half as much energy. That's what their formula says. So when you see the red one, that's supposed to have twice as much energy than this one. The velocities have to be, as Professor Lewin just showed, half of each other, because you've doubled the mass, then you have to have the velocity. So the white one's going half as fast from the same force, and their theory says it has half as much energy because it's going half as fast, when clearly it doesn't have half as much energy. Clearly it's just a nonsense, a provable nonsensical notion. It has no credibility as a scientific fact. When science says the 8-pound bowling ball has twice as much energy, science is full of anal residue. So red one is the lighter one. It goes up to about this little mark here. And then the white one goes up to this little mark here. Same difference, okay? Not half as much energy. When he does it over and over again, you'll actually see that the white one actually does more, okay? Pushes the spring a little bit more. So you'll see it probably here. It goes further than the red one went. All right, so what does this crazy person say? He says Gary's cheat. So an experiment that has the fewest places to mess up, fewer conditions of the experiment to be in any way distorted or perverted, the experiment that has more integrity is the one he calls a cheat somehow. And why would you do that? Why would you say there's a cheat in the experiment you're conducting without explaining what the cheat is? How is this cheating? Yeah, that's right. It's not cheating. All right. So Pyrrho says, no, they have different momentums and they move this scale completely differently. When, of course, that isn't the truth. It isn't what happens in the real world. It's just absolute nonsense. Okay. So I've done that. All right, pause again. Alright, should be back, and we'll do this thing here, and just again go over this one more time. Did it in the last video, but we'll do it one more time. Alright, so you compress two springs the same amount, and you put a 1 mass object and a 2 mass, so you just double the mass of whatever this mass is. You shoot them into gravity. Gravity is a completely conservative force in the sense that whatever you push into gravity, it'll give you back in the opposite direction. So you put something in, it gives you exactly the same back. So the truth is that you shoot these two objects. Their formula says when this object leaves, so when it just leaves the spring, right, just leaves the spring, and now has its maximum momentum, has its maximum amount of energy, and as it moves into gravity, it's going to lose its energy, and then gravity is going to give it back the energy again, pushing it down. So it's all conservative. You can't win or lose anything anywhere. Now, as soon as they leave the spring, their formula says, okay, momentum says these two things are equal. Okay, clearly equal, same thing, just a different shape, but it's going to do the same thing, same amount of pounds of energy. If you threw it, if you weighed it, it weighs the same pounds in terms of its movement. You can't change that because the pounds are in the spring's compression. The energy is in the spring's compression. The energy is going to go into the objects. This spring will move slower. This spring will move faster, but it doesn't change the amount of energy that's in the objects. It'll be exactly the same amount of energy that the spring is going to give the two objects. Their formula says this one has 1/2 the energy and this has twice as much of the energy. That's what their formula says. So now they go into space. This one has 1/2 the energy. This one has twice as much. Now the lighter thing does go higher in the gravity. Doesn't mean anything because it's lighter. Of course, lighter things go farther. Less friction with the gravity because they have less mass. So it doesn't mean anything. Then they come back down, and when they compress the spring, they're going to compress it right back to exactly the same amount of force. So somehow this object has less energy when it leaves, but then when it comes back down, it compresses the spring 100%. Same exact amount of energy. 100% here, 100% here of the energy is returned. So how did it lose half the energy and then somehow get the energy back again? It makes no sense. It's a paradox. It's silly. It can't possibly be explained rationally. You can't explain how this makes any sense at all. That the joules of energy went from 100, let's say it was 100 joules of compression, and somehow it went to 50 joules here, okay, leaving, okay, and then somehow it's back to being 100 joules when it lands, okay, 100 joules. Makes absolutely no sense. Zero sense. Zero, stupid, crazy, insane, can't possibly be reasonably believed. And this is in the core of physics. Right in the, right in, like here. Right, next to the, this is deep in the physics. This piece of crap is way deep in the foundations of physics. It clearly shouldn't be there. It's clearly a nonsense. Just like labeling plus and minus wrong, they should fix this because it's wrong. Right? And it's really problematic to a lot of physics because they create new particles and do all kinds of things based on these silly definitions of energy because they keep giving these light things hugely more energy and they don't have all that much energy. They don't have it. It doesn't exist. It's not real. No experiment verifies it. Alright, so that's all I can do, right? I can only reason. If you're incapable of that process, then clearly there can't be any accomplishment here. I'm just talking to the wind because you're too silly and stupid and bigoted and moronic to accept the simple truth that this was a very big mistake that physics made in its history. It jumped on a silly bandwagon and now it's just too embarrassed to jump off. And that's all there is here. There's nothing more. They're just too embarrassed to admit, oh, yeah, for 400 years, we did something really stupid. Really stupid. I mean, obviously bad physics. Obviously bad science. There's no evidence for it. There was no need for it. It accomplished nothing. It improved none of the physics. It made nothing possible. It just was a nuisance. All it's been is in the way all this time. All it's done is cause a lot of going on wrong roads, getting wrong answers. All it's done is had physics say something like, physics says use a lighter bowling ball. And it's just bad advice. It's really bad advice. Alright. Alright, so now we'll go back to comments, I guess. Yeah. Alright, comments. So these are just the typical troll crap. But you constantly insult people, so that's a lie. 99% of my videos are me doing physics videos, explaining what I just explained. And the insults are only when I'm insulted, okay? And so you're saying I have no right to defend myself against other people's accusation that I'm doing pseudoscience, or that I hate math, or that I have some disorder that makes me incapable of making a physics argument. Horse shit, okay? Just nonsense as arguments. We all believe, and then they, arrogantly tell you you're an idiot or a moron because you don't believe. So, no, I don't have to accept all of that crap, James, okay? And you wouldn't if it was happening to you. You wouldn't just sit there and say, oh, it's all okay. I'll just keep eating your shit forever. No, there's a point where you just say, we can't have a civil conversation because you're an obnoxious, arrogant lunatic, essentially. And Pyrrho is that. I've caught him now in numerous statements that are just plain factually incorrect. And he keeps making them. He keeps telling everybody they have to believe this because there's some sort of science behind it. That we scientists have scrutinized it and came to the conclusion that it's credible. They have no evidence for it. They've countered none of my arguments. They've proved absolutely nothing. All right. This claim that Pyrrho somehow started this, it's not somehow started it. It's a fact in the record. Okay, he couldn't make a civil video. When I started this channel, he just mocked it. Okay, he didn't take any of the arguments seriously. Okay, because he believes anybody who argues with the conventional theory is just a flat earther. They're not worthy of any respect, that they're some kind of con artist, that they're somehow cheating because they're going to critique his perfect religion. And those are the facts, asshole. So if you cared about the facts, you would go out and research it. Just if you cared about what the MV squared formula, where it came from, then you'd go to the history and you'd read it and you'd see just how bad the history is. But instead of that, you're a dishonest little weaselly troll who just shits on me, okay, as if I am the guilty party here, when no, I am the one who's made thousands of videos now, merely explaining what I see as the evidence, what I can find as evidence, and explaining how, yeah, this is not certain. Why are you saying that photons are waves when photons have a gigantic polarization? Why are you saying that a single photon is produced by an atom? Well, how can a single photon be produced by an atom? An atom's this big and the photon's this big. How does the atom do that? All right, anyway. Okay, it somehow started this when you are overtly hostile and rude. See, again, this isn't true. Okay, I'm not overtly hostile and rude. So why don't you show me the innocent, nice comment that I ever deleted or blocked? Show me the person making a respectful counter argument to something I said, a respectful critique. Show me the comment where they said, oh, wait a minute, I think you might have that wrong. Here's an experiment. Show me that civil comment for which I, somehow treated it unfairly. And maybe you can find 2 or 3 examples where I made a mistake, where I read somebody's comment wrong or something like that. But just show me where there's any effort for me to be at all rude to people first. That's just a lie. Okay, and so you can keep selling the lies, right? The lies work, but that's all that is a lie. Because I'm perfectly willing to draw it. I'm perfectly willing to talk through it. But really, I'm not going to be called an asshole in the middle of the conversation for no good reason. All right. To anyone questions your physics, it's laughable. No, your comment is laughable because it comes with, again, no evidence. You're just deciding you're going to characterize the history. I lived the history. I know the history. So, fuck you, liar. Okay? Because I lived it. And I know it. I know it in detail. So, fuck you. You're lying. You have zero evidence. You can go, get what you fucking deserve, you liar. Okay, now Blue Vision is Wayward Horizon. This is this fucking douchebag that's been lingering about for 10 years, changes his whole fucking philosophical view every 2 fucking months. This is the weasel, okay, that destroyed the Wikipedia page, because I see there was 4 links on the Wikipedia page for, and this is sort of an important subject, Lesage gravity. So there was 4 links to alternative opinions. And I posted a 5th link to my physics, okay, because it was on the subject of Lesage gravity specifically. So it's a perfectly relevant link. And what did this Wayward Horizon douchebag do? He caused a whole internal stink inside of Wikipedia. All right, and what is the end result of his accomplishment? So to justify deleting my link, they deleted all the other 4 links. So people's access to alternative theories and alternative arguments, all of them were wiped out, okay, to satisfy this fucking troll's ambitions to harm me. I mean, it's just so fucking petty. And then this asshole sent me $50 apologizing. And they're still doing this horse shit. Will you grow your own life, jackass? Find something else to do with your fucking life than sit there and, sniff my anus. Okay? Fuck you, you dumbass. I mean, shit. To pretend you have some kind of, he said, DraftScience, you are, to have this conversation under this new fake name, okay, pretending to be some person that has any reliable opinions about a fucking goddamn thing is just so weaselly of you. All right, DraftScience, you are a rancid old man. Ooh, gee. Yeah, that hurts me so deeply. You're an ugly troll, okay? Fuck you. Now fat, ugly troll. Gary, weaponizing somebody's pain in an argument like this is cowardly. Yeah, and that's exactly what Pyrrho did. He sit there and pretended my anxiety disorder is a subject here. And as I pointed out in a comment to him, I had to delete one of his comments because YouTube wouldn't let me respond to it, right? My response comments don't show up on my own fucking video, which is just too ludicrous. But I point out that, I also have vertigo. Are we going to say that vertigo is why me and Pyrrho can't get along? Why was it that Hothliday couldn't get along with Pyrrho? Was it something endemic about Hothliday that made it impossible? He couldn't have a civil conversation with anybody on Earth. It was all Hothliday's fault. No, the fact is Pyrrho is an obnoxious, arrogant douchebag who can't stay on the fucking subject. And anyone who wants to have a conversation with him where they're going to disagree is going to find it impossible to have the conversation because Pyrrho will keep changing the fucking subject and he won't answer the simple questions. Pyrrho, do you honestly believe that an 8-pound bowling ball has twice as much energy as a 16-pound ball? Do you honestly believe that horse shit? That your science is selling? Are you really that fucking stupid? All right, anyway. So obviously he is the one who provoked all of this. He did it in the Skype conversation. He kept insulting me constantly and pretending these aren't insults. You're disregarding all mathematics. You're a pseudoscientist. Blah, 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 blah. All this horse shit. I'm supposed to take his insults endlessly? Fuck that. Oh, you're the coward. Oh, disgusting. I sincerely regret ever having had affection or admiration for you. Yeah, you never had it in any way that would do a person. No one wants your affection or admiration, frankly. You're a toxic troll. Okay? You're the asshole who weaponizes everything. You weaponized Wikipedia. You pervert and distort everything to your fucking perspective, period. And you don't care about anything called an ethic. You despicable piece of shit. Because you not deserve it with any way you treat people. So again, I have treated people honestly and fairly. I have broken no one. I have never even broken a heart in any kind of dishonest way. I've never cheated or stolen or ripped anybody off. I've never done any fucking such thing in any way. Have I ever mistreated anyone who didn't fucking punch me in the nuts first? You lying little sack of weaselly shit. Ugh. Again, do you think To Be Serious has justification for her comment she made on Pyrrho's video? Do you think To Be Serious has any evidence whatsoever that I am that any of the 3 major videos that I'm sort of promoting on the subject of gravity, what is a photon and what is energy, that there's anything in those videos that she has any counter argument to, in any way that she could make any argument saying this is pseudoscience, that she could defend her assertions? Disgusting. These trolls. Disgusting. Let's see. So this Jeff Who says, I honestly feel more insulted if someone was saying I don't believe in any math. Well, that's the whole point, right? It's that Pyrrho thinks his insults aren't insults. Oh, I wasn't insulting you. Yeah, you were. okay, and overtly in a personal way. Again, just to bring up the fact that I have, okay, in my personal life, I have my own trials and tribulations. They're completely not described in any way on this channel. They have no relevance to this channel at all. I never come on this channel going, once in a while I'll say, I'm having a tough day, a little bit of anxiety. Okay, maybe twice out of the thousands of videos. So no reference to it. Pyrrho does videos overtly drunk, okay? Dysfunctionally drunk, all right? He displays his dysfunction. He talks about his dysfunction, And so he attempts to use the fact that I have a personal circumstance as some sort of evidence of some sort of breakdown. Okay, he has no evidence of this breakdown. There's nothing wrong with my arguments. There's nothing wrong with how they've been presented in this video. He can't sit there and say, oh, you're completely dysfunctional and delusional because you're just not gripping reality or some kind. He can't make any of those arguments in any kind of rational way. He has absolutely no excuse for this fucking bullshit behavior of saying, your brain tumor is causing a problem. Bullshit it is. The fact that you're a lying sack of propagandizing shit is the problem in this conversation. Let's see. I must be, so the Jeff guy says, I must be missing some information. Accurately speaking, such a thing doesn't affect me as I'm not concerned about immutable events from the past. Well, I think all of the past is relevant, frankly. I mean, there's a point where you just say, fuck this, okay? And that's what it is with Pyrrho. I've already pointed out, I mean, he'll agree to some premise, and then 2 days later, he'll pretend he never agreed to the premise being true. And you have to start all the fuck over. I mean, it's just useless to talk to this lying sack of shit. So, whatever. So, yeah, nothing too significant. All right, and the other comment really doesn't matter. It was just another rag where he's pretending he didn't start the argument when, of course, he started the argument. When, of course, he started getting personal first. Of course. And so it's just more evasion of his responsibility. And that's all he is an evader of responsibility. And that's the fact of his life and every bit of his life. So we will go back to his comment section just to see if there's anything in there worth saying something like, holy shit, look at that pile of crap. So we've already seen the rags, right? The pointless rags from his little troop of fucking morons. Yeah, that's the mystic. He's also a bit of a moron, actually. But anyway, not nearly as bad as the Pyrrho. Okay, that's not the right video either. It's got to be here, right? Yeah, there it is. Okay. Comments. So there's shit in his description of the video. Since Gary will not stop personal insults and all conversations seem to really be about his inner ape and anxiety issues. So, again, so there's no evidence that I'm starting that argument. That's your argument presented to me already, and I'm just fighting back. Okay. We cannot continue to talk. Well, I don't see any use in it either. I always suggested, why don't you make videos? Because this is perfect, right? You make a video, you make completely idiotic assertions, and I'll play your idiotic video and point out how your assertions are, in fact, idiotic. Okay, since I doubt he will adhere to any limitations about personal insults. You're the one who can't adhere to it. You're the one that can't apply common courtesy in an argument. Again, where's your demonstration? I've done, dozens of interviews with people where we get along just fine. Even though we disagree, everything goes along just fine because we know the roles we're playing. You can't understand those roles. You're an arrogant, obnoxious, trolling asshole. You don't fight fair. You don't stay on the subject. You're not in any way... can anyone communicate with you? It's impossible. And you have no evidence of it. Yeah, there isn't any evidence of you doing any great communicating. Okay, however, I explain one final time what the energy equations do that the momentum equation doesn't. So again, there's absolutely no evidence in his video. no evidence, no proof, no demonstration that momentum fails and kinetic energy works. None. And the assholes like this Warbles douchebag sits there and types his crap about Gary's self-confessed ape brain. Might be no point in talking to Gary because he's too stupid to understand. And why is Warbles all butthurt? Because I pointed out some facts about his stupid fucking flying solar panel. You know, that gluing solar panels on cars doesn't make much sense, actually. Like, it doesn't really save millions of gallons of gasoline or any of that horse shit. And he just couldn't stand that somebody critiqued his great, brilliant, fucking stupid idea. Anyway, and then the Gale Force is just this fucking turd gray text who's a nihilist douchebag, okay, who just wants to sing and dance. And that's all he ever really wanted to be, was a girl, okay? He just wants to be a girl in the silly sense, in the Homer Simpson sense, okay? He wants to be the Homer Simpson version of a girl, okay? A Barbie. He wants to be Barbie, okay? He wants to have a little dream house, okay, and a little yellow Corvette that has a radio built into it and all that kind of, yeah, that's all he wants. He's a trivial, silly, self-absorbed pile of fat, blubbery shit. Okay. Dinah Cat Love Me guy. This guy has been around forever. Obnoxiously snarky comments for anybody who isn't a phantasmagorical, believe in glitter and unicorn asshole. And that's all he is. Alright, well, some of the spring energy has to be lost to heat. So again, tiny percentage. We're talking about a half. Half the energy somehow disappears from the heavy object, even though it reappears when it falls back down. That's their theory, retard. So you're not really even close if you're going to guess, oh yeah, that's where it all went. And so, you know, Pyrrho says, of course, entropy. What does entropy have to do with it? Oh, that's right, nothing. I mean, entropy, again, is the argument that it's a lot easier, okay, to break something than it is to make something. That's all entropy really means. It's a lot easier for the heat to go into the little tiny pieces and fly in all directions, heat, than it is for the heat to be converted into to create a funnel that makes the heat all come out of one direction. You need a complex system to make it go in one direction. And that's entropy. That's a simpler way of understanding entropy. Maybe it would help to clarify explaining the flip side of momentum and inertia. So again, he just stated what momentum is. It's not conserved. So I just played you Professor Lewin overtly and kind of emphatically saying you can't fuck with momentum. It's always conserved. You can't fuck with it. Blah, 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 blah. So you don't think he's right either, right? Bark Lord, douchebag, dumbass, fuckhead. Yeah. The larger the ego, the more energy is required to move it. And this is coming from, somebody with a big fat, an ego as big as his fat butt. And the to be serious bullshit. This accusation, Gary's mistaken ideas. Where do you acquire this right to type this slop on somebody's video when you can't defend it? Why shouldn't you be considered a troll? A little bitchy but hurt troll. So again, you win the Homer Simpson of Womanhood award. Okay, you don't want to be better than men. You just want to be just as bad as men. Yeah. All right, so we got who you are. Let's see what he says here. To be serious. So, to be serious just made accusations she has no evidence for. And let's see if Pyrrho does the responsible thing and say, well, maybe you're saying that a little too harshly, because we really don't have any evidence that he's wrong. Yeah, let's see if he knocks her down a notch. If he tells her, hey, you know what you just said could piss anybody off. If somebody wrote that shit about me on some comment section, I'd be really pissed off, bitch. Let's see if he says that. Probably that's an interesting question some of us have focused on last decade or so. But for what it's worth, I guess that's what that is, I went back in because, okay, so he went back in. No, he didn't. He went back in Years ago, he trashed the physics. Okay, we had arguments about lasers and different experiments and blah 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 blah. And some of it was actually useful because it challenged both of us, and that was good. But it all degraded into this same slop it's degraded into this time. And it's not because I'm forcing it to become slop. It's because Pyrrho can't help but keep arrogantly saying he's on the right side, and I'm a moral trespasser, or I'm a heathen, or I'm some kind of evil force. He can't resist doing that. I actually think this unit analysis point is something a lot of people should wrap their head around. This unit analysis. The units are so simple in the sense that it's a Newton is a stick of butter, and a joule is a stick of butter after it falls a meter. What analysis do we need? It's weight. Energy is weight. Okay. It's the non-science way to get a handle on what science is doing. So that's the funny statement right there, isn't it? That's just magical right there. It's the non-science way to get a handle on what science is doing. So he's the non-science supporter. He's the one thinking non-science is the way to go. Because then you can really understand the science by doing non-science. Okay. As an aside, I always dispute... Okay, so this is just the stupid thing about, velocities are always relative, but as pointed out in my videos numerous times, it doesn't matter because energy is the difference between velocities, and it doesn't matter whether this is going 50 miles an hour this way and this is going 40 miles an hour that way, or whether this one's really going 60 and this one's going 30, or it doesn't matter. The difference is all that matters. But the fact is, in the real universe, there is something that's actually moving and something that may not be moving. That's a real thing. There's no reason to break three-dimensional space. And that's what these assholes want to do. They want to pretend three-dimensional space is some sort of illusion, which is just too silly. And it's just a religion. And now Jerry shows up. I wonder if Stephen Bro will show up. Oh, that'll be so good. I was thinking about meaning of integrity. Does it have any value if no one else outside yourself believes in it? So that's kind of funny coming from Jerry. If you are the only person who believes in your integrity, how can anyone insult it? So what do you think? An insult to your integrity is essentially a lie about who you are and what you're doing. So don't you understand that if you allow people to get away with lying about who you are, that will be the impression. You don't think anybody has an obligation to correct lies? Like anybody who's ever been falsely accused, they should just shut up and accept the false accusations and let them stand? I mean, fuck. Too stupid. It's not like there's anything to defend except your bubble. No, there's a physical, your credibility is being attacked and they're using it as an excuse to dismiss you. To Be Serious is attempting to dismiss my arguments by claiming that they're too loopy and too silly, and obviously too silly, and they're of no worth, and no one should pay any attention. You think that's a fair? So you think the 10 years' work I have done earn me nothing? I'm not entitled to any kind of credibility or any kind of fairness in how I'm described? And you would accept that. If I did that to you, you would accept it. Oh, bullshit. Okay, not mentioning any names, but if someone likes to use the word integrity, he might have something to think about. Again, what do I have to think about? In what way have I engaged people with any effort to harm them personally or do any damage to them or any of that crap? Where is your example of me going out and doing that when I can give you your example of somebody who just kept showing up in the comments section to make derogatory statements, claims that just weren't true. Somebody who keeps prefacing his arguments with non-arguments, things that aren't up for debate, instead of just presenting evidence. All right, so who this is. Oh my, probably the cowboy. Okay, probably a day-old account. Can't say that I have much sympathy for you. Oh, that's good. Most people ignore the barking dog. So, no, that's not provocative. Okay. But you made eye contact and gave him attention. So again, I needed Pyrrho's attention. Get fucking real. Okay? Pyrrho has, like, gets less than 100 views on a video. No one could give a fuck what he says anymore because he's an incoherent drunken troll. So, I mean, what the fuck? I need Pyrrho's attention? No, the argument is there's people out there claiming they're intelligent and that they can do logic. And what I would like to have is this application of a logical counter-argument. Now, I've made the argument pointing out that there's absolutely nothing defending mv squared, 1 half mv squared except religion. It's a dogma, a silly dogma. It has no value. It has no good history. There's nothing that forces the existence of this thing. It's just a fucking pebble, in your teeth. I mean, it's a rock, and all it's going to do is break things. It's not going to make anything any better. It's not food. Physics won't be better off with this thing in its mouth. All right, anyway. Now he won't stop gnashing his teeth into your points. Well, shouldn't I? Shouldn't I take his stupid statements and illustrate, well, this is what science says. This is how intelligent people who say they know something about the subject behave. This is how bad their arguments are. That's not evidence of why there's a problem in physics? No, I think it's huge evidence. Duh. Let's see. He loves attention. So again, more horse shit. I have no interest in any of this. I have a capacity to live an imaginary life. I love playing video games. I love just entertaining myself. Okay, so there's nothing here that I love. I don't love having to make these arguments. I don't love having to live in a world full of asshole, trolly, loony, doopty, silly people who have to keep being, everything has to be explained to you. You can't on your own do any rational thinking and get right answers about a single fucking question you can be asked. You're going to get the wrong answer, and if you ever get a right answer, it's going to be for the wrong reason, because you can't understand evolution. You can't understand a single aspect of your existence on this fucking goddamn planet. And that's dangerous, because that's how I got here. Ignorant, stupid, deluded, bug-like humans. Okay? They're a menace. All right? They're destroying the peace and quiet of the universe. They're loud, obnoxious, smelly invaders. Okay. He lives for attention. So just where do you get this fact from? Where does the fact come from? Where? Yeah, that's right, nowhere. Where do I gush over my little devotees or nice comments or any of that? Where is there any evidence I feed on anything other than the arguments, fuckhead? Every single piece of evidence shows that I love the arguments. That's all I want is the argument so I can win it. That's the only ambition here, is to destroy the evil ignorance. That's it. There's nothing else. I'm a crush, kill, destroy robot for ignorant notions. Anyway, he thrives on attention. He says the same thing again. In his lonely basement. So again, that's supposed to be a critique that means something to a smart person. Oh, he lives in a basement, therefore he can't know anything, right? I mean, Einstein lived in some hovels, not great places. Lots of people have life circumstances, but somehow is an important detail, and it needs to be in Pyrrho's video. Yeah, that's really important. I don't actually live in the basement, okay? It's where I do my work. Yeah. But fuck you people. I mean, just fuck this horse shit. Let's see what Pyrrho's little response to that horseshit was. I don't want sympathy. It is what it is. Public discourse. Yeah, well, at least that's a more honest statement. That's right. This is a huge liability of attempting to communicate with other human beings who are defensive little trolly pieces of shit. And who have no fucking integrity. And yes, that's a real problem. The lack of integrity of the people on the internet is a real fucking problem. Alright, anyway. So, I did do the physics first. So, just, so save this for the end. So, I'll try to do that in the future. If there has to be any drama or communication with the troll types, I'll always try to put it at the end of videos. Okay. So, nobody has to endure it. But I'm sick of these liars calling me the liar. That I can't stand. I won't stand it. So anyway, enough of a video. So I just don't, there's not going to be, so to the Pyrrhos, do you really think, Pyrrho, that formula is going to survive the future? Do you really think so? I mean, you really think the future is going to still believe that nonsense? That it's going to go, like, say, to an alien convention somewhere and it's going to try to defend this piece of crap that has nothing on its side? I mean, no evidence except for, look, when you throw light things into gravity, they go further. That's all. You're going to go show up at the alien convention with your, look, it goes further theory of energy. Well, again, I've already pointed out, I've illustrated the paradox completely. I mean, I've shown you the paradox. It's a paradox. It makes no sense. You can't say it lost half the energy and then magically it got it back again when it landed on the spring. It's too frickin' stupid. How can any of you fucking horses' asses sit there and defend it? It's too silly. It's just a funny place, this planet. I just didn't know intelligent people were so full of shit. I mean, god damn, are they dumb. Whew. I went to college and learned it stuff. I learned it how to lie right through my face. Alright, so this has been another DraftScience video presentation.